Tierney, oh, le grand pont pour éliminer Furlong. Qu'est-ce qu'il lui a fait là? Qu'est-ce qu'il lui fait, Kieran Tierney? Oh, Kieran Tierney, c'est quoi? C'est quoi ça? Il vient souhaiter une très bonne année aux supporters d'Arsenal. Kieran Tierney, quel rush! Magnifique! 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 Kieran Tierney! Kieran Tierney! Magnifique! Oula! Oula! Magnifique! Kieran Tierney! Magnifique!
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning to you too, Andrew. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. Had a pretty good weekend. It was beautiful weather here. Our heat wave has come to an end in Ireland, which is a shame, but made the most of it over the weekend. Stayed in the back garden, cooked lots of food on the barbecue, had some drinks, and watched a movie last night, which made me think it must be fucking great to be Ray Winston.
Go on. Tell me why.
Well, I'll tell you why. I watched Black Widow. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
Not yet, no.
Fairly standard Marvel fare kind of action by numbers, watchable on a Sunday evening kind of thing. But Ray Winston plays, I guess, is he a Russian or a Hungarian guy? I don't know what it is, but he just sounds like Ray Winston. You know, there's no, well, he tries to do an accent, but basically he just sort of is Ray Winston, like, yo, you mean you're going to sort this out right now? You know, like that. So he must be the perfect guy for like an improv game. Like, put Ray Winston in a scenario doing a specific accent. Like,
and it's just Ray Winston.
It's just Ray Winston. Suggest one and I'll do it right now.
Okay, put Ray Winston in a Western, a cowboy film.
Look here, you fucking horse. I'm going to get down off you now. You know, it's just the same. It's amazing. Like, fair
He's
play.
He's a chameleon.
He is, but just one colour.
Yeah. He's just a green chameleon.
Yeah.
Steadfastly refusing to change colour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in The Departed, he turns up and he's Ray Winston.
He is, yeah. He tries. He does try, though, doesn't he? He goes, you get in the car.
Yeah. They gave him like one note. They were like, oh, they sort of extend that sort of AR sound. And he was like, right, I'll do that. Yeah. Everything else, Ray Winston. So in fairness to him, he's probably thinking, they've paid for Ray Winston.
Well, that's
I might as well give them Ray Winston.
That's exactly it. You know what you're getting when you hire Ray Winston. You know exactly what you're going to get. So nobody should be shocked. It just occurred to me that it must be fucking great to be him. I mean, the only other person who completely steadfastly refused to do any kind of accent, I think we spoke about this before, was Sean Connery when he was in Highlander and he was the Spaniard. I'm from Seville. And it's like, my name is Juan Pablo Ramirez.
Yeah, that's true.
He just was like, oh, yeah, you're Spanish. How will they know you're Spanish? Just say, I'm a Spaniard. That's how you know I'm Spanish. But
a Jedi mind trick, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Charisma can carry you a long way, is what we're learning, I guess.
How was your weekend?
It was good. Our heat wave kind of ended before yours, and so we descended into storms and floods over the weekend. There's a sort of, suitably apocalyptic feeling to it all. But also, I've been watching the Olympics here and there. It's quite strange, obviously, watching an Olympics without crowd. It's usually such a big part of the experience. Yeah. But, it's nice to see some other sport occasionally from time to time.
I haven't
every 4 years.
Yeah. I haven't seen a single second of any of the Olympics yet. And it's not really that I'm not interested, just sort of haven't bothered.
I don't believe you. I bet you've seen a second of the women's football.
Oh, I have, of course. I saw the goal that Viviane Miedema scored the other day. Listen to this. Listen to this. Can you hear that?
It's not, is it? Oh, my good Lord.
They're fucking outside.
Don't move, Andrew.
Bastard, man. If I move, they'll see me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that bit in Jurassic Park where they're in the car They just got to stay very still.
They're having a right.
Yeah, what a goal that was, by the way.
Oh my goodness. What a goal. That was a really brilliant goal. And it looked like a pretty entertaining game. 3-3 draw between the Netherlands and Brazil, but that really was the only second of the Olympics that I've seen. Has any of the good stuff started yet? Like the running? Like traditionally my interest in athletics is restricted to like the sprinting and maybe the 800 meters and the 1500 meters.
I don't think the athletics is properly underway yet. I mean, there's been a lot of cycling. The diving happened while I was sleeping. Tom Daley won himself a gold medal.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. I think the taekwondo has happened. Some of the sort of martial arts have happened. But no, if it's the running you want, that is all still to come. As far as I'm aware. Okay.
Well, something to...
The fast running as well. That's the most interesting one, right?
I saw a good tweet yesterday. I can't remember who it was or where it was exactly, but somebody making the case that they should just put an ordinary person in every Olympic event so you can really understand how good these athletes are. Because they're all just
handy for context.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're just running a bit fast, aren't they? But like put a guy in, the 100 meters, even in the heats, and he's sort of still chugging along at 22 seconds, and these guys are all finished. I mean, we know they're fast, but just give us some real life context for all this. So,
I think that's an interesting idea. I'd be up for that, especially with some of the more obscure stuff. Things like the pole vault. I always wonder with the pole vault. How do you get started? Like, what's the first time you're like, right, I'm going to do it this time? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a high margin for error.
Yeah.
It's like the, like with everything, you get much better at things as you do it, as you practice. And stuff like, the guys who have those wingsuits and they skim across the earth and they go through like mountain formations which have like a hole in them and they go straight through those. I mean,
madmen.
The attrition rate must be pretty fucking high in that sport, right? There must be just guys splattered across mountains all over the world. Well, his first go...
They never make it to YouTube, those guys.
You're not allowed to post videos like that, I'm sure. But the pole vault is an interesting one because it's quite terrifying when you look at it.
Yeah, and I always wonder, like, what's the trajectory? Are you a high jumper who then is like, what if I had a pole?
What if I had a really bendy stick? I could do much higher jumps.
I just can't imagine the first time you're like, right, I'm going to stick that stick in the ground and go for this. I mean, it's ludicrous, but it is impressive, don't get me wrong.
No. Fair play to
we
them.
had skateboarding as well in the Olympics. Did you catch any of that?
I didn't, no.
I think a 13-year-old girl won the gold medal, which is quite impressive.
I mean, a 13-year-old girl won the gold medal in skateboarding at the Olympics. I mean, there's a sentence you would not have heard in the 1980s.
No, I know. I know.
I mean, brilliant
strange,
for her, but like, it is a bit weird. Do they have pretty much every sport in the Olympics now? Because I remember
saying,
yeah,
go on.
No,
you see what you say.
I was just going to say, like, cheese rolling, is that an Olympic sport, or is there, all these weird sports that exist seem to make it into Olympic Games now?
Yeah, they added 5 new sports for this Olympics, which were skateboarding, surfing, karate, and sport climbing. Now,
that's only 4.
Oh yeah, that's right, 4. Sorry.
What's the other one? Like owl thumping or something?
Weirdly, what are the 5 new Olympic sports? Baseball is the other one. Apologies.
Right.
But I have heard that the next Olympics will have breakdancing as a sport.
Now, that is a sentence you might have heard in the 1980s.
Yeah, exactly. We've come full circle with that. But it is interesting because, like, karate or something like that, you feel like, okay, well, in a way, it's surprising that's not in there. Judo's been in there, taekwondo's been in there, but skateboarding is slightly more left field. It's certainly, and when you get to breakdancing, I think we are definitely blurring the territory of what a sport is. But that's nothing new in the Olympics. I believe that in the Paris Olympics, like in the early part of the 20th century, putting out fires was a sport.
Well,
Don't
how
quote
do
me
you
on that,
do
but
that?
I'm pretty sure that's true.
How do you do? I mean, do you get like points for how you put out the fire? Right, there's a fire, go put it out. Oh fuck, what do I do? Hang on, let me take a big
Artistic skill.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll get a big mouthful of water and just run over and go, and like a human hose or something, or what do you do? You
I
like
don't know.
fan it out with your blazer? How does it
Yeah,
work?
I guess so. I mean, I guess it's how long the fire burns and how many people are killed. I don't know. There must be marks. You've got a massive pole as well, probably, to jump
Right.
up to the high windows.
Yeah.
I don't know. The reason I know this is that I think I was in a Horrible History sketch about it once, and now I may have distorted reality, but who knows?
Who knows?
Anyway, they're putting some weird stuff in the Olympics. Is the takeout from this?
For sure. And who knows what we'll see between now and the end of the games. Right. So, look, Arsenal played a pre-season friendly against Millwall at the weekend.
Yes.
Did you watch it or did you watch the goals?
I've watched the highlights, and then I watched some of the, those kind of compilation videos of individual players that kind of show what they did.
Yeah.
I sort of absorbed the game that way. Did you watch live?
I did not. I don't think it was available to watch live, was it? I think they put it out to watch in its entirety after the game had happened. I don't think it was live.
Is
and
that
at
correct?
that point, I'd seen someone tweet that we beat Millwall 4-1, and that's too much of a spoiler for me to sit down and watch the whole 90 minutes then. Like, had it been live, maybe I might have. But I watched the goals, and that was kind of it. I suppose, there isn't a great deal you can take from a behind closed doors friendly against Millwall, other than we won a game for the first time in pre-season, so that's good. And the goals were pretty nice. Couple of them.
Some nice goals, particularly the Pepe one I thought was really nice. Nice little step over from Lacazette. Good finish from Pepe. Andrew, we conceded off another set piece, technically.
Did we?
So,
I didn't see the goal we conceded.
Right, so it was a corner that was headed out, and they knocked it back into the box from sort of the halfway line and scored, and they hit the post off another set piece. So if you're inclined to get het up about a friendly, that's your area to target for this one.
Yeah, well, it's the theme of pre-season so far, isn't it? Our set piece weakness. I mean, maybe it's what you said last week. The guy's just knocking it all down to build it back up again. Isn't that what, like, who's the golfer, the Irish golfer, Padraig Harrington, who won a couple of majors and then completely deconstructed the way his swing
Right.
to garner some improvement or other. So he radically changed, I think, the way he addresses the ball, the way he hits the ball, the way he swings the club, everything. So he had to relearn the whole thing, and it took a while to get back to being good again, if he ever did. I'm sure he did. I mean, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But he's still there and doing it. So maybe that's what's happening with our set pieces. It's just right. Forget everything you ever knew about set pieces, which is head them away from the goal. We're going to do things differently.
A
from now
radical
on.
new theory.
Yeah.
Which involves not heading it away.
Exactly. Until we reveal that the solution to the problem is heading it away.
Maybe we're just lulling our competitive opponents into a false sense of security by showing this as a potential weakness, and then actually to disguise our true weakness, attacking set pieces. I mean, Arsenal, of course, was supposed to be away right now, weren't they? But that all went up the spout.
It certainly did. And look, a real shame for everyone over there who is going to go to those games and see the teams, etc., etc. But I suppose, can we read anything into the absences? There were some players who didn't take part in the game against Millwall, and some of them have been linked with moves away. Hector Bellerin was one. Joe Willock wasn't there. There was somebody else, say Kolasinac, but it was suggested to me on Twitter that maybe those guys were perhaps caught up in the positive COVID cases, and maybe that explains their absence more than imminent departure, which it could just as easily, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, the club are never going to quite unlikely to come out and sort of speak about individual medical cases. And there have been many instances, or several instances certainly over the last 6 months or so, where players, have been affected by COVID or had to isolate, and the club has managed that internally. And I think it's probably fair to assume, given that we don't think there are any great significant developments with those players in terms of their transfers out the club. I mean, it's a coincidence, I think, certainly, that they're all players who could be on the way out. But I think it's a fair assumption that some or all of them were in some way affected by what happened with Arsenal, because, we know there were first-team players involved and those guys were on the sidelines. But fingers crossed, whoever is affected is not too seriously affected. And that was my understanding anyway at the time, that, there were no... I think it was even asymptomatic, the cases that Arsenal had at London Colney.
Right.
Which shows, again, the problem of kind of containing and tracking this thing when you can just have it and have absolutely no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, it's just something that football is going to have to contend with throughout the course of this season, I think. And I don't think it's going to be the first or the last issue that football clubs have with coronavirus during this season, but fingers crossed those incidents are few and far between, for obvious reasons, goes without saying.
I can't remember if I said this on here before, but we're sort of in this weird awkward place where we've got a nation that's unlocking, but we still have quite stringent, strict isolation rules, and it just is creating cases like this, not just for Arsenal, but certainly like in the other industry I work in, the entertainment industry or the catering industry. Places are being told to act and behave normally, but also, everything could be whipped from underneath you at any moment. So it's a particularly tricky time, and I think other pre-season trips will probably fall the way of Arsenal's, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, look, there's one thing about pre-season. It's another thing if it starts to impact you during the season, and what rules and regulations and what kind of things the Premier League might have set in stone for, let's say a team is down 7 or 8 players or something like that, which, it's not impossible. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible. So we'll have to wait.
Can I raise something about the America thing? Do you think it is significant or matters at all? I mean, someone like Stan Kroenke, for example, I don't think has been over in London since the pandemic began. And presumably Arsenal's trip to Florida, I think, would have represented an opportunity for people like Mikel Arteta, Edu, Vinay to be in his company and have, discussions about strategy. Do you think he would have gone?
Well, he wouldn't. Maybe Josh would have.
I think somebody from KSC would. I just wonder, given that we know, it was previously talked about that there was the infamous barbecue at Josh's house in 2019 where they decided, let's pursue Pepe. Do you think it matters that the manager, for example, doesn't get in front of the owners in person in the way he might have done if they had gone to America?
I mean, I think you could say that would be useful, wouldn't it? Like, face-to-face contact is always a good thing, in any kind of work environment. We can all do the Zoom thing or the FaceTime thing or WhatsApp video calls or Skype or the myriad ways we have of communicating with each other. But, there's nothing quite like face-to-face. I don't know that it will have a huge or should have a huge impact on anything in particular. Like, unless they had some kind of I suppose not beyond the realms of possibility that they had some meetings planned or a kind of, an afternoon summit or whatever it might be to finalise or get the green light for certain things. But I guess it just makes it a little bit more awkward rather than it not happening at all, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that's true. The only way in which I think it could matter is if, if there's a case or an instance where, I don't know, maybe Mikel wants the club to push the boat out on a player. Maybe those wheels are greased easier in a kind of social setting. Yeah. Over a beer at a barbecue or whatever it might be.
Get Josh drunk and then
exactly
film him going, sure, you can have all the money, man.
Or just film him really drunk and jumping into a pool naked or something and then use that to blackmail him.
This is going on TikTok, motherfucker, unless you give me for 70 million to buy James Madison.
Yeah, exactly that.
No, I'm sure they'll be able to cope. But yeah, look, they were supposed to be in the States for what, over a week or more than that, I think, because they were going to fly out on the Wednesday. They were due to play, well, I guess it would have been a week because they would have played that Everton/Millenarios game on the Wednesday. So Wednesday to Wednesday, and probably come back to the UK on the, on the Thursday or Friday, because we do have that game against Chelsea coming up on Sunday. So there would have been a week over there. It would have given them some time to do a few face-to-face things, but I think they can obviously still do those. I mean, Josh could just as easily, now that international travel is open, he could come to the UK. But again, I've got no insight into whether that will happen or not. I mean, there was some talk, wasn't there, about him being in the UK a few weeks ago, or maybe it was when all the Daniel X stuff was going on.
I don't know that for a fact, but it wouldn't surprise me enormously. I think it's Stan particularly that hasn't been over. But I don't know. You'd imagine that they will be keen to be more present at games next season, given that, I guess, Josh particularly was prior to the pandemic and then hasn't been, of course, throughout that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a fairly regular face in the kind of executive seats.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah. I don't think he'll be on the North Bank. I'll put it like that.
Best of luck to him. I suppose the one major piece of news that has happened is the contract extension for Emile Smith Rowe, which sort of happened on Friday. After I'd finished literally just talking to Art de Roche, and we were looking, I was like, oh, look, they're about to do the Smith Rowe thing. So we didn't get a chance to talk to that. So we can have a chat about it. Obviously, very pleasing news. I think we said here that it's probably one of the easiest things that was on the to-do list. When you look at everything that has to be done, getting a 20-year-old who's been at the club since he was a kid, who loves the club, getting him to commit his future to the team is pretty much one of the simplest things that you as a technical director or as a club that you can do. And they did it. So fair play. A new contract, 5-year deal, and a new number as well, and number 10. So let's talk first about the deal and what you think of that, and then we can talk about the number.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think you're right. It was seemingly one of the most straightforward things to do. And I do wonder if maybe because of that, it wasn't perhaps as high up Arsenal's agenda as it might have been. I think the club were pretty confident they would get this done, but there wasn't necessarily a huge rush to get it done.
Do you think we as fans were more anxious about it than the club were or the manager were, internally, because of all the stuff that was going on with Aston Villa as well, because they were bidding and, it's just part and parcel of the transfer cycle that I think we as fans tend to believe or place more credibility, I should say, in stories which we don't like. You know what I mean? It's true. It's like, this terrible thing could happen. Oh my God, it's almost certain to happen, and stuff that seems far-fetched, isn't quite as credible. So, that was more of an issue for us maybe than it was for him or the club itself.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I do think the Aston Villa interest accelerated the talks with Smith Rowe, probably put a few quid on the contract too. Nevertheless, I think it's really good news. I mean, we were all in a place where we're kind of not quite sure what to think about Arsenal's direction at the present time. But I do think if you look over the last couple of years, the substantial new long-term contracts for the likes of Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli, Balogun, you have to say, was convinced to stay, Smith Rowe now. That is a building block of some sort, and it is something that I think fans are going to rally behind. And I think, Smith Rowe was so important to the team last season. It's, his individual quality is one thing, and, clearly he's got bags of it. And even in this friendly against Millwall, you could see him, it's particularly the positions he takes up on the pitch that make him so useful, so dangerous. He plays through the middle, but you see him on both flanks. But I think it's what he contributes to the team more widely. And, when you look at our form pre-Christmas and post-Christmas and what is the major sort of differential between those two teams, it really was the introduction of Smith Rowe. It's not to credit him solely for it, but I think he did have a huge impact. So very pleased. Was never worried about Aston Villa, but nonetheless, I'm glad it's done. He's obviously delighted. Mikel Arteta seems delighted. Yeah. And the fans are delighted. So, it seems like a big win.
Yeah, it's a good news story. And at a time where we're looking for as much good news as we can get, it's certainly one to get behind. Now, the 10 number, I think this is really interesting. I like that he asked for the number. I think Mikel Arteta's comments were interesting too. He said he asked for the number 10 shirt, so that shows you the ambition and desire. He said, I prefer players who ask for more than maybe they can take, but if they believe they can do it, don't put a number or don't put a limit on it. When he asked me and asked the club he would like to get the number, I said, okay, let's go. We talked a little bit, we discussed it, and he knows the consequences of that, but he feels prepared to do it. And if he's prepared to do it, I'm going to be right behind him to try and make him as comfortable and as happy as possible to do what he wants to do. So I think there is emerging from Mikel Arteta in some ways, how do you put that? I think he does feel a bit protective of some of the young players. In that, people will say, well, look, he doesn't play Martinelli enough. And he said similar things about Martinelli. It's also quite similar with the Saliba thing, in that it feels to me, maybe it's a little bit of fear on his part, in that he doesn't want them to experience things which might damage their development and their potential. You know what I mean?
That's the most generous, not generous, but I think one of the most interesting readings of the Saliba situation. I've never heard that suggested before, really. But what if he thinks, if I drop this guy in the Premier League tomorrow,
I think he basically said that.
Create a problem for him.
He basically said that about Saliba, in the sense that I'd have to dig up the quotes, but I'm 99% sure he said something along the lines of, we have to remember he's just 19, whatever he was, and it may damage him, to come into the first team and not be ready. Oh God, I'm going to have to dig them up while we're talking, but.
But the reason I say that's interesting is simply because I don't think the common perception is that Arteta is protecting Saliba. Do you know what I mean? Certainly that's not what I'm seeing on social media.
Yeah, I get that. I think I have them here. Do I have them? I want to protect the player, is what he said about Saliba. Let me see. I want to protect the player that we signed and the future we have alongside him. He's talking about his loan to Nice. He said the best way to do that is to give him minutes and play him, and that's on loan. But, if the best way to give him minutes or to develop him is to give him minutes and play him, you could make the argument that why can't we do that? You know what I mean? That maybe it's overly cautious. But I mean, what do you think about the comments on Smith Rowe, in the sense that he knows the consequences of that? Do you feel like, particularly at Arsenal and Arsenal right now, given that we lack creativity, the number 10, there is a weight of expectation. There's a weight in that number because it's Dennis Bergkamp, it's Jack Wilshere, it's Mesut Ozil, players who...
William Gallas.
Don't know, never heard of him. That they have this status because they got the number 10 shirt because they could do what we wanted a number 10 to do, and we're not quite sure if Smith Rowe is going to be able to do it. I mean, I think he's a hugely talented young player, but he is still 20. How do you read it? Do you think it's a positive thing for Smith Rowe? He obviously doesn't feel fazed by the number. He wanted it. So it shows, like Arteta says, it does show ambition and desire to become that figure at Arsenal, to follow in some very, very famous footsteps.
Yeah, I love the ambition of it. I have to say, I love that he's like, well, I want to be the number 10, and I want to be it for 10 years or longer. I think that's fantastic, and I think, that's the kind of fearlessness of youth as well in him, probably, just thinking, well, why not? What an opportunity, what an honour to wear that shirt. Arteta, being slightly more experienced, slightly older, is probably looking at both sides of it. But overall, I think it's a really positive move. I know some people go, oh, shit, does this mean we're not going to sign a number 10? And maybe we'll get onto that as a discussion. But I think that having, squad numbers don't matter, right? They don't really matter. But having Bukayo Saka as your number 7, having Emile Smith Rowe as your number 10, and having these two guys in your first team kind of week in, week out, I do think does send quite a message. And I do think that Arsenal's problem for a long time, or certainly in recent history, has been making a lot of very short-term decisions and then not getting results, and that the unhappiness that engenders. And I do think that kind of saying, look, this 19-year-old, 20-year-old guy's our number 10. We've got another teenager who's our number 7. These are crucial parts of this team's development. I do think that, along with signing players who are, between kind of 19 and 23, it does just sort of create that idea of a project in a much more holistic, satisfying way. And I think more fans, not all fans, but more fans are prepared to kind of buy into that and maybe give it a little bit more patience than they otherwise would.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that. I think if you can see, that there is a definite plan or a strategy, then it is much easier to get behind. I mean, you could look at, even if you go back and you look at some of the signings that we made when Emery took over, like there was a plan in a sense, right? There was logic could be applied to the signings. Like Socrates was an experienced centre-half to give us a bit of that. Lichtsteiner, an experienced backup to Bellerin, who was never going to play that much. Torreira, here's your young central midfielder. Guendouzi, another young central midfielder. I can't remember who else we signed.
Leno.
Yeah, Leno, like a mid-20s goalkeeper, sort of made sense, right? But there was, I think, at the heart of it, it was sticking plaster stuff in a way.
Yeah, it was kind of filling in the gaps.
Yeah, yeah. And now the gap is so big, we have to rebuild the wall. So if you can rebuild the wall in a way that people can get behind, and yeah, look at the age profiles of a lot of the players in the squad. The ones that we're going to count on, for example, you think of Gabriel at centre-half. Ben White, when he comes in, is 23 years of age. Kieran Tierney, 24. Smith Rowe, 20. Saka, 19. Martinelli, 20. Who am I forgetting here? I can't remember. Balogun is 19, 20 years of age. You're starting to build a squad which, all going well, and not all of it will, but hopefully if enough of it goes well, we'll be together and grow together and develop together. And then you've got, some experience in the shape of Pepe, who's 26, Partey's 28, Aubameyang's 32. So you do have that bit of experience, but what you're building is a much younger core group around which you can then add experience or bring in some younger players as well. And we've seen the two signings that have come in, both 21. We've mentioned it before that the age profile of most of the players that we've been linked with credibly this summer is somewhere between 20 and 23, 24 years of age. And that's kind of it. So you can see that there is a plan there. And I do think that if people can see a plan, whether it works or not, I think you're right to say there will be a bit more patience. It's not to say everybody is going to agree with it, and there are going to be people whose opinions on the manager and the technical director are set in stone, and there's nothing you can do about that. But if you see the club trying at least to operate in a way which makes sense after what we've been through and the way we have operated in the past, I think you do get a bit more time from people. Yeah.
I think so. And I think as well it's kind of more sustainable. I mean, let's say things do go really badly wrong for the manager. If you've got a young group of players who are developing over the next 5 years, then probably it requires less of an overhaul when a new guy comes in. It's not like you're just trying to fix problems in the short term for this guy. I mean, Smith Rowe is going to be a useful player for any manager over the duration of that contract. So, yeah, I think it's a really good move, and I think the club are right to lean into their emphasis on young developing talent. And I think the shirt number, although it's something he asked for, I think granting it to him kind of signifies a willingness to lean into that.
Do you think it also signifies his particular place in the team, if you like? You know what I mean? So giving somebody your number 10 shirt, you know, certain numbers have weight, whether you like it or not. You know, whether you think a number matters or it doesn't matter, certain numbers have weight, like a number 1 or, you know, the number 9 has got to be a striker, and with that number comes a weight of expectation, but also, you know, from the player himself. If you're the number 9 at a club like Arsenal, you know, you expect to be starting games. Similarly, with number 10, do you think it suggests where he is in the pecking order to an extent, or do you think that is something that will still be relatively fluid given his, I suppose, relative inexperience as well? You know, at 20 years of age, he's had a half season really for Arsenal with the loan spell at Huddersfield and you know, some previous experience when he was a bit younger. You know, do you expect him to be a mainstay, like Saka is a first name on the team sheet player when he's fit, even though he's 19? Do you think that's going to be the case with Smith Rowe?
I think he was approaching that at times last season. Even when he wasn't first choice as the number 10, he invariably found his way into the team, you know, usually on the left-hand side. And I think, you know, he was, to borrow the phrase that Arsene Wenger used about Robert Pires, kind of the oil in the engine of our attack a lot of the time last season. And I think that he'll likely remain that. I think whether or not another number 10 comes in, I still see him playing an awful lot of games, and probably our most important games. And I think something I said last week is I do wonder if, you know, the acceleration of giving him that new contract, probably the slight wage hike they gave on what they were hoping to give him due to Aston Villa's interest, I do wonder if that slightly changes the conversation about the kind of attacking midfielder you might bring in alongside him, you know, because I think it does become about being alongside rather than ahead of at this point. And it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one to balance out, I think, between, you know, who's a player who can dovetail with Smith Rowe without kind of damaging his development in any way.
That is, it is a tricky one, because you want him to play, you want him to develop. You've made the investment in him in terms of his contract. You've signaled your belief in him by giving him the number 10. But at the same time, I don't think you can burden a 20-year-old, even if we only have 38 Premier League games next season. We hopefully will have a good few cup games to get under our belt. But even so, even in the course of just 38 Premier League games, I don't think you can put that weight of responsibility, that creative responsibility on him or him alone, not simply because, you know, it might be too much for him or physically it might be too much for him, but just from a practical point of view, there are going to be games where it doesn't happen for him. As with every player, there are going to be periods perhaps in the season where he has a little dip in form or a little dip in confidence, and we know how significant that can be for any player, whether they're 20 or not. So you need like an alternative. You know, you wouldn't go into a season with just one striker, because if that guy dries up in front of goal, you're fucked. So the same kind of thing applies to a player in his position, that you need, as you say, someone who can dovetail with him, but you also need an alternative, or, you know, someone who can come off the bench. Maybe we have a player like that in the squad in Bukayo Saka as well, and that's a potential option. But at the same time, I do think it's going to be part of the conversation between now and the end of the transfer window. What I would say, and I think I said this on Friday, is I think Smith Rowe gives you time to push that signing out to the end of the window. His is it's not like the central midfield situation, where I think that signing needs to happen as soon as possible.
Yeah, there are situations where Arsenal needs someone in before the start of the season. You know, I would say, for example, Arsenal needs some sort of second goalkeeper, I think, pretty urgently. So that's one. But with the number 10, I agree this makes it a bit less pressing, and maybe it gives them the chance. We've spoken a lot about Mikel Arteta's admiration for Martin Odegaard and how, you know, he is a player who's shown he can play with Smith Rowe, and there have been reports, I think, in the Norwegian press this weekend about, I mean, nothing, you know, tabloid tittle-tattle, but, he looks disconnected from the squad in training and doesn't look happy and that kind of thing. I do, you know, despite all the signs, I still wonder if there may be life in that one towards the end of the window, and I wonder if having Smith Rowe might afford Arsenal the opportunity to kind of wait and see.
Yeah, I agree. I think there will be an element of that. But just going back to the other one, I mean, the squad as it stands, we've got some questions actually on this, so maybe we'll do that in the questions bit, will we? Because there's been some questions about incomings and outgoings and transfers and all of that stuff. So we'll do that in part 2. Is there anything else you want to touch on with regards Smith Rowe or any other Arsenal business?
Covered it off. I think everything else we'll probably cover in the questions, won't we?
All right, we will. Okay, we'll take a short break. We'll come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you send to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. I'm going to go first. James, kick this one off with a question from Chesney McGrath, who's at Chesney535. And he says, why have we not signed anyone that would be a guaranteed starter? Hashtag Cronky out.
Well, I'm assuming he's not including Ben White in that because I think he will be a guaranteed starter.
But we haven't signed him yet.
But
technically, he's correct.
Yeah. He is. They could discover, touch wood they don't, in the medical that his knee is made of, I don't know, jelly or something. But other than that, I think he will be.
That would not preclude Arsenal Football Club from signing the player.
If anything, it would make him perfect for the club. But nevertheless, have we not signed anyone? So we've signed Tavares and Lokonga thus far.
And we've signed a young striker. You reported over the weekend from Fulham, an 18-year-old who, I'm sorry, he's had a hard life on his face. Does not look 18.
No, he looks a bit like Mark Poom. I don't know if anyone remembers Mark Poom.
Oh, yeah.
But he's got a bit of Mika Biereth is his name. Actually quite an interesting signing in that he was the top scorer in... The under-18s Premier League is divided into kind of north and south. He was top scorer for Fulham, who won the Southern Division. He scored 21 goals in 21 games in those fixtures, 13 assists in a very free-scoring excellent Fulham team. He was offered pro terms at Fulham more than once, including quite a good offer in the summer, and he's turned that down to join Arsenal. I would imagine he will go... I think he's too old for the under-18s now, so I think he'll go straight into the under-23s. Nikolai Müller, who was kind of leading the line for the under-23s last season, is going out on loan to the German third division. And so I imagine he'll sort of replace Balogun probably as the kind of under-23s front man. But it was interesting talking about that because, you know, there are a number of quite promising strikers at Arsenal. Obviously, in the first team setup, we talk about, Martinelli and Balogun, but you look beyond that. Muller did all right last season. You've got this guy, Biereth. There's a couple of others in the academy whose names escape me right now who are quite highly rated. And although it might seem a bit like overkill, actually, if you think about it, having strikers is kind of the most valuable commodity you can have in football. I mean, if they don't work out, they probably have the highest transfer value if they've got a reputation as a goal scorer. So seems like a bit of a no-lose, really, to kind of collect as many young strikers as you can, and even if they never make the first team, they might bring in a few quid down the line.
Yeah.
But in terms of the first team setup, I mean, Eddie Nketiah's one, for example, that we're hoping to get some money out of this summer. But yes, it's correct. We've not yet signed a first team player.
Does that concern you?
Like,
where are you on the, as your little concernometer? The closer you get to the start of the season, obviously, the more you want your squad to be settled and you want, the issues to be addressed. So if it's just tipping away at the bottom with now, 3 weeks? Under 3 weeks, in fact, to the start of the season, to our first game away at Brentford. Where are you on that? What would make you feel, I'm not going to say more confident because I don't know how confident you are as it stands, but what would make you feel like, what would need to happen for you going into that first game for you to let the rest of it play out over the course of the window, like up to deadline day? Because I do think that there is going to be a lot of business done towards the end of the window simply because of the dynamics of the window itself, the market, the financial situation we're in, clubs having to make decisions, to compromise, to say, well, maybe we didn't really want to, bring that guy in or sell that guy, but we've got to do something. Those things are going to drive a measure of business. So what would make you feel okay about heading towards that chaos?
Well, so I am pretty relaxed, actually. I am not too stressed out. I think what would change that is if, I think the central midfield one is the most interesting because, at the present time, Granit Xhaka is still very much an Arsenal player. If that changed suddenly, I would be concerned about having a replacement for him. We had a few questions from people about Lokonga, actually, sort of saying, is he ready to kind of step up and play in the first team? Is he someone who could come into the first team straight away? And I have to say, for example, Saka you out on the Discord says, after watching the Millwall game, what do you think about a Lokonga Partey partnership against teams that sit back in defence against us? I mean, I think he was encouraging against Millwall, but I think that would be an awful big mantle to say you're our starting central midfielder straight away, coming straight out of the Belgian league. He's 21 years old. I'm not sure that would be the right decision. No,
I think pretty much everybody that I've spoken to about him, and I spoke to the Belgian Pro League commentator for Eurosport on the Arsecast on Friday, people will have heard it. His opinion is that, he's a good young player, but, is going to take a bit of time to settle in and develop, and that's normal, I think. So I would be with you in the sense that I think Xhaka is going to go. I think it's pretty inevitable he's going to go. I don't think he's going to be involved with us, in pre-season. I don't see him coming back. Do you? I mean, feels like...
Well,
he should be back now, right? Surely he should be back now. If Kieran Tierney was back last week, why wouldn't Xhaka be back now? I know Switzerland went a little further in the Euros, but he must have had his holiday at this point, so...
Yeah, I think they did progress to the knockout, so maybe that's part of it. Also, obviously, there was a COVID scare, so that might have slowed people coming back a little bit. I don't know. I mean, the only thing I think about Xhaka is, what if the bid never gets any better? That, if there were reports in Italy this morning saying... there's actually, I think they were in the English press, maybe in the Mail or something, saying, the bid is kind of stuck where it is and doesn't seem to be improving. I've spoke to a contact in Italy, a journalist who said, for the present time, it kind of is where it is and they want to make Arsenal sit on it. Arsenal, as far as I know, are not in a hurry to sell the player for less than the value that they have placed on him, that they deem very important. I don't know. I just wonder what happens if it never gets better.
if it never gets to the point where we feel we can accept the bid, I guess you keep him. I guess.
I mean, but then you've sort of got the contract situation of 2 years out.
And you've got a player who has probably, in his own mind anyway, checked out to an extent, or wants a move. I mean, I think part of this is because Xhaka wants a move.
Of course, definitely. Right? But we know about him, I think, that he can want that produce performances.
I wouldn't worry about that aspect of it. I don't think he would just be like, down tools or anything like that. But I think it's not an ideal situation for a manager to have a player who had his heart set on a move and it doesn't happen. I think that's a difficult one. But I think that the central midfield is where I would like to see the signing. That's the one that I think everything else we can kind of cope with, I think, is the way I would put it. We can cope until the end of the window. It doesn't mean that we don't have other things to do, because very obviously we do. But I think if we go into the first bunch of games of the season, what is it, maybe 3 games before there's an international break? Is it 3 or 4? I don't know, maybe 4. But if we go into that with our central midfield sorted, with that mythical party partner in there and ready to go, and fit and healthy and set to go from the off, then I would feel more confident about the team. As it is, it feels like that's a weakness, even with Lokonga. And I know we've got El Neni, who's perfectly serviceable, but maybe you need more than serviceable if you want to get off to a good start to the season.
Definitely. I think if you felt that you weren't able to be picking Xhaka and you didn't have another player in there, I think we'd be in trouble. I do worry about that for sure. I know we got some steady performances out of El Neni at times last season, and I know Lokonga's a promising player, but I think we need more in that area of the pitch. I'll be fascinated to see, basically, if Roma's bid for Xhaka doesn't dramatically increase and they look to play it out until the end of the window, I'll be very curious to see how Mikel Arteta plays that. Whether or not he goes, well, this player's on the way out the door, therefore we won't use him, or whether he has to be more pragmatic and say, sorry, Granit, you got to play. Because I think, looking at the collection of midfielders that we actually own and that are part of the club, God only knows where Lucas Torreira is, by the way, on that front.
He's on holidays, according to his Instagram. So,
okay, there you go. But I think, I think it'll be interesting to see whether or not Xhaka gets kind of roped into those first few games. But that's the area. I mean, we had a lot of questions about right back today. It's becoming a bit of a theme of the window, isn't it?
Have you got one there? I've got a couple here if you want me to go through them.
Yeah, I mean, Little Chili, who's at Takar75, says, let's talk about right back, assuming Bellerin is sold. Do you think we can make do with Chambers and Cedric? We've had a left side bias in the past. And then other questions, Ashley Birkinshaw, does it terrify you that Cedric might be our starting right back? Jack Porter, if Bellerin leaves, how comfortable would you be as Chambers as first choice? Lots of questions about right backs.
Yeah, we had one on the Discord as well from David the Sky. Do you think we can risk selling Bellerin and not fill the position with a new player relying on Chambers and Cedric, given we're not playing in Europe and have fewer games this season? Given the options we have right now, let's make the hypothetical that Hector leaves, that there's a deal done for him, whatever kind of deal it might be, where Inter Milan pay us 50p a week for the next 7 trillion years, whatever it is they're trying to do.
They pay us for every tree Bellerin saves, something like that.
Wow.
A lot of tree-related add-ons.
Could be the most lucrative transfer of all time, because Hector loves trees, as we know.
Exactly.
So let's say you've got in the squad, you've got Callum Chambers, you've got Cedric, you also have Ainsley Maitland-Niles as well. Let's say a right-back signing doesn't happen before the opening game of the season. Who would be your choice to start?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind it would be Chambers at the present time. I think he's the best that we've got.
Does that not, with all due respect to him, and I think he's been solid in that position for us. Does that not say something about our need for a player in that position? Because
Maybe. I mean,
I saw a story.
He's been pretty good though.
I think he has been pretty good, but I also think that if you want to improve, I don't know if you're going to get it from a guy. Like, it's not, I don't think signing a right back is going to be the difference between European football and not European football next season. But yeah, I mean, I would much prefer Chambers to Cedric.
Yes.
Much prefer it. And I can't remember who was talking about over the weekend that Cedric is in line to start the opening game of the season because he's been so impressive in pre-season. And I'm thinking, fucking hell.
I'd be very surprised if that was the case.
I would too. But, you know, even that says plenty, you know. So, yeah, I mean, is a right-back signing, is it an urgent thing for you? Is it one that, let's say we bring in the attacking midfielder and we bring in the party partner, and again, with a hypothetical, let's say we in inverted commas, go big on those two signings. Do you think right back is an area that has to be addressed before this transfer window ends, or is it an area that we can, you know, go into the season with the players that we have?
I think in a bind we could sort of make do with what we've got. I don't think it's ideal, but you know, one factor in this is, you know, we know one of the targets for that position is a guy called Tyler Adams at Leipzig, and it's going to be very difficult to get him this summer. There may be other targets in that position that it's difficult to get this summer. I think if there was a player who is the right player, but we have to wait a year for them, I think we can get by. We're certainly not short of numbers in that area of the pitch. We've even spoken about Ben White as someone who's played there in the past. I don't think that would be a regular thing at all, but in an emergency. And I think Chambers ticks quite a few boxes for Arteta. I know he's not perfect. It's really funny, isn't it? You know, when players have a good run, sometimes the perception of it is different. Like Joe Willock has a really good 6 months, and we go, yeah, but that's just a run. And then Emile Smith Rowe has a really good 6 months, and we're like, yeah, he'll do that forever. And Chambers, I guess it's somewhere in the middle. I think he had a really strong second half to the season, but we're still like, is that maintainable? Can he improve? I don't know the answer, but he's, of the options we have, maybe even including Bellerin, I think he's the one who showed the most last season. So yeah, I think my conclusion is basically I would like a new right back, but if on the list of priorities, it's probably below certain other positions, and I'm starting to wonder if it will be doable in this window.
What if it's a case of affordability rather than desire, or you know, the fact that we, you know, look at our squad and go, well, that'll do. What if we just can't afford that? We had a question here about money from Matt Gooner on the Discord. He said, transfer rumours suggest we're going to spend quite a bit of money this summer, but we've lost a lot of money over the last season. There's no clear indication where the funds are coming from. Do you think it's possible KSE are forwarding money from next summer's budget under the proviso that it's mostly spent on young players who will be ready to go next season, hopefully limiting how much business needs to be done in a year's time? He said, I'm not basing any of this on rumours. I'm just trying to figure out where the money might be coming from.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the ins and outs, but I think it's unlikely that it's as literal as that, I suspect. Presumably the club is borrowing this money from somewhere because, you know, they're finding significant amounts of cash or making substantial commitments to deals. I don't think this will be about money, because I think if Bellerin goes, it will probably be for a decent fee, not, you know, crazy money, but like the club would like 20 million. It would have to be getting close to that. And I would think their intended replacement might be in that ballpark too. So I don't think that that's hugely the issue here. I've not felt any point in this window like, oh, Arsenal are going to run out of money. It genuinely feels like they have made a commitment to do the business they need to do to avoid last season happening again. How that would play out over the coming years, it really depends on Arsenal's success, doesn't it? I mean, if Arsenal get back in the Champions League next season, then the budget will be very different. So it's almost impossible to know. It's kind of a bet that the owners and the club are placing on the success of these deals over the coming years. But I do think, clearly there's a directive to sign younger players to protect those values. I mean, they're not going to go out and pay 30, 40 million for people approaching 30 because, that's money they won't get back, and they've done that too much. But what do you think about the right back one?
I think ideally you would get someone in.
Definitely.
The reality or the practical side of it, though, is that you've got still in the squad 4 right backs, or 4 players who can play right back. Bellerin, Maitland-Niles, Chambers and Cedric. So to get one player in, and somebody who, let's say is the right-sided Kieran Tierney, that's what we're looking for, right? That's what we're looking for, a player who can come in and be that. You've got to get rid of at least 2 of those. And Maitland-Niles is only kind of an option at right back. So it means you're going to have to get rid of Bellerin, and you're probably going to have to get rid of Cedric or Chambers, one or the other of those. And I think Chambers is better than Cedric, so that would be the wrong move, I think. But the reality of it is Cedric has another 3 years on his contract. And that makes him maybe more difficult to move at 29 years of age, unless we're, working hard behind the scenes to try and shuffle him on somewhere else. But I don't think he came from Southampton to Arsenal and signed a 4-year deal taking a pay cut. So I think that is in some ways, it's a problem. It's an obstacle to moving on Cedric if you were that way inclined. So I have a feeling that our business will be elsewhere. Like at this point, I think I would be surprised if we signed a right back.
I still think it's a possibility. I still think there's a decent chance, but I do think that the sooner somebody leaves, the more plausible that becomes. I don't see them adding a 5th right back, basically.
No, that would be crazy.
I think they're really keen to avoid what happened last season with the registration issue, and that leaving them with players who essentially had no value because they were omitted from competition. I think they're really keen to avoid that happening again. It was very disruptive and very bad for morale. So I think, when we talk about this kind of next set of signings, I do think some players need to go before others can arrive. I think that's particularly true at right back.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that may be true regarding Xhaka as well.
Okay, here's a question from Not Cameron in the Discord. Will we ever sell anyone? Sonny Cool, also on the Discord, says, while we've done well transferring players surplus to requirements over the last year, do you worry that we still have Kolasinac, Torreira, Nelson, and even Willian, Nketiah, etc., etc.? At what point do you start getting concerned that we're not selling some of the players we need to sell, in part, perhaps, to finance some of the deals that we need to bring in?
Yeah. I think it is unfortunate for Arsenal that they're sort of trying to go through a heavy rebuild in a summer where no one's got any money. I mean, there is a benefit to that. Potentially you can use that to your advantage if you are able to spend. But who have we sold so far? Mavropanos basically sold, although he's on loan technically.
Yeah.
Guendouzi the same, right? That's pretty much it. You look at the list. I mean, Joe Willock obviously is one that we would expect revenue for. Granit Xhaka, Hector Bellerin, maybe Lucas Torreira. I mean, I have to be honest, with Lucas Torreira, I've slightly given up on the idea that we'll get a decent fee for him.
Yeah. I mean, with a question, I kind of have a question from Sean Fitzgerald, who's Sean's Gone Wild, at Sean's Gone Wild on Twitter, who says there's been zero talk of Lucas Torreira that I've seen, positive or negative. What do you think happens with him, and what are the chances he has any role to play for us in red and white next season? You know, where does he want to go? He wants, he talked about going back. He talked about going close to home, but I think there's probably, an understanding there that as much as he might want that, given everything that's happened to him, the reality of that kind of deal happening is unlikely because of, just the financial disparity between what we would want for him and what it would cost for a club in South America to take him. Then there's Italy, and pretty much every club in Italy is trying to do deals, all these loans with obligations to buy, or pay as you go kind of stuff. So where does that leave him? And he's not involved. He's not in training at the moment. He's on his holidays after the Copa America. Do you expect him back at Arsenal? Is he going to come back and start training? I mean, he is obliged contractually to do that, same as Xhaka, I guess, as and when their official holidays are over. So, what we think of as a bloated squad already is even more so if he returns. So,
yeah, I mean, I kind of think the likeliest outcome with him is some sort of loan deal. Almost as a kind of compassionate exercise, of just granting him the opportunity to be where he wants to be. I just feel like his stock as a player has dramatically declined. He obviously has been through a lot of personal issues as well. He lost his mother. I think that he's on very good terms with Edu and Arteta. It's not like there was ever a fallout or anything like that. And when he went to Atletico, I think there were quotes from Edu at the time saying, we wanted to find a solution that was good for Lucas, and we, keeping a close eye on him. I just feel like we'll get something similar this time around. I know that he was very happy in Madrid as well. And if the opportunity came to go back there, I think he'd be up for that. But I'm not sure how.
He didn't play, though. I mean, he barely played. Only 600 minutes of action in La Liga, and most of those are sort of late subs in games. So, it hasn't done his stock as a player any good, really. He won the title there, and he'll be, obviously very happy about that. But in terms of playing time, he can't be that pleased with how that loan move went. I'm sure Arsenal aren't either. If he'd played all the games for Atletico Madrid, we'd be talking about a much more valuable asset, if we can talk about players in those terms.
Yeah, and actually I know there were people kind of on both sides of the divide who almost felt like Atleti were trying to drive his value down. I don't think personally there's any truth in that. It just seemed to me they didn't really want to pick him. But yeah, I for a player who cost us over 20 million quid or whatever it was, 25, something like that, I don't think we can realistically expect anything close to that. So yeah, I am a bit worried about the sales more generally. I still hold out hope that it's the younger English players who will bring in the revenue, and I'm looking at Joe Willock potentially, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Eddie Nketiah, Reece Nelson. I still think we'll do okay out of those guys. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but I'm more confident I am of that than I am of, say, Torreira.
Sure. I think, going back to what we were talking about with Smith Rowe, and how relatively uncomplicated that was when we're thinking about selling players this summer, young, homegrown English players, some of whom have contracts which are favourable to a buying club, are probably the easiest ones that we can do. We will look to extract maximum value from them, but, the market suggests, doesn't it, that there is money out there for these players. We talked about the guy who went from Chelsea to Crystal Palace. You know?
I mean, Harry Wilson left Liverpool, I think, for 12 million quid yesterday. He went to Fulham. He's a young winger from Liverpool, 12 million pounds. I mean, by Liverpool standards, it's not huge revenue. He's 24. But, that shows there is money around for homegrown talent. you'd like to think Arsenal could kind of capitalise on that. And I do think, in terms of outgoings, Bellerin and Xhaka are still fairly plausible departures. And you would have some, you'd hope to have a bit of change out of those two. But, yeah, I mean, someone's got to come up with the money.
Yeah, and then you get to the ones which are really difficult. There are some difficult ones. I mean, Lacazette.
Yeah, there's a question here, Mr. GCL, Georgios Lambrou, who said, do you think that signing Tammy Abraham would be a significant enough upgrade on Lacazette to justify the quoted 35 to 40 million fee would potentially have to pay? And basically, I think secondary to that question is, how plausible is a Lacazette sale right now?
Well, that's it. There literally hasn't been any reported interest in him, which isn't to say there isn't, but the transfer rumour mill is pretty widespread, and I don't think I've heard one rumour involving Lacazette.
No,
so
I haven't either.
I think at this point, I don't see him going anywhere, and I think that then precludes any other kind of striker signing. Yeah,
I think that's the one. I mean, people say, well, Nketiah's going to go. I wrote last week, I think without Lacazette going, there won't be a new striker this window.
Would you, I mean, let's say it's 30 million for Tammy Abraham. Would you sell, if it was Lacazette for 12, 15 million somewhere and Tammy Abraham for 30 million, would you do it?
I think I probably would. I'm not convinced that Tammy Abraham is the kind of quality to be Arsenal's starting centre forward in every game for the next 5 years. I mean, he could be. He's got potential and he might get better.
What does your brother think of him?
My brother thinks, who's a Chelsea season ticket holder, if you're not aware, that he's a good player, but probably not quite there. Probably not quite the sort of top level quality that Chelsea would require from that position. Bear in mind, they're competing for Premier Leagues and they won the Champions League last year. But that is his take. Good player, but maybe not the very top level. And I think based on what I've seen, that makes a degree of sense. But do I think a player like that could be a very valuable squad member to Arsenal over the next 5 years? Very possibly. I mean, I've seen people say of Tammy Abraham, they get Welbeck vibes off him, as if that's a real negative. But I'd argue Danny Welbeck was a pretty useful player for us, albeit a stylistically different one. While he wasn't Thierry Henry, he played a lot of games and contributed in a way that was generally positive when he was fit.
When he was fit, yeah. I mean, I think his big issue was fitness, obviously.
Never fit.
Yeah.
What do you think about Abraham?
I said this the other day. I just have such trauma about signing players from
Chelsea players.
From Chelsea. Like Ball Sima on Twitter says, name all the players we bought from Chelsea in the Premier League era. Now, out of those players, name one player who made it at Arsenal. And I think I called it masochistic the other day, and he tends to agree with that contention. I can see the logic in it, though. I could see the logic. Like, if you could get money for Lacazette, and some of that money could then offset the fee that you would pay for Abraham. I think what Chelsea want from him is a bit too much, but he does have a good goal scoring record for a striker of his age. He's got some goal scoring pedigree. So
he scored goals from a really young age in the Championship. I mean,
like a 25 goal season for, was it Aston Villa or?
Yeah, Aston Villa. And I think maybe he was at Bristol before that and was very good. I mean, he has always scored goals, and he has scored goals in the Chelsea team as well. So you can't knock his record. I think stylistically he's quite interesting because he's something different to what we've got. He's a bit bigger, he's better in the air. He's a super athletic guy. It's an intriguing one.
I see the logic, but it surely has to depend on Lacazette and what you can do with Lacazette, because like I say, get some money for Lacazette. It goes some way to offset what you pay for Abraham. You've got a striker who's, 24 years of age? You've got a striker who's 32 years of age. in Aubameyang. I do think the gap between Aubameyang and Balogun is too big.
I agree.
You know, so you need somebody else in there.
With that.
No, I don't think so either. As promising as Balogun is, I mean, he's never played a minute in the Premier League, which isn't to say I don't think he can contribute next season. I think he can, but if you're talking about a team that doesn't score enough goals, you can't have that big of a gap between your. I don't even mean in age. I just mean in experience between your strikers, and hope to address that problem. So on that basis, I can see why you could make a good case for Tammy Abraham. But it's just hard for me to look at a Chelsea player and not be traumatized by what's come before.
Yeah, I mean, even the ones that should have been good signings haven't been, like we did quite well to sneak Lassana Diarra away from them, and then he left after 6 months.
Yeah.
And William Gallas, when he arrived, was a top-class central defender and never really produced that at Arsenal. And, obviously ones like Willian and Luiz are kind of their own category, but there is
even Czech, was fine, but like pretty underwhelming.
Yes, and was a player on the way down, at that point. He effectively had been replaced as number one at Chelsea by Courtois. So, yeah, I understand that. I think Abraham's youth is what makes it slightly different. But
yeah,
I also think it's, in terms of next season, I'm not sure Abraham guarantees you more than Lacazette. It's definitely one that would be more of a kind of mid to long term acquisition. I just think that the difficulty is finding someone to buy Lacazette. And like you say, when you talk about the English players, part of the reason people are willing to pay for them is that their salaries aren't that crazy. They've come through the academy, so they're not on huge money. Finding someone to take on Lacazette's salary is in itself tricky. And then to think of a transfer fee on top of that, when they could say, well, we'll just wait 12 months and have him for free.
Yeah, and he can just wait 12 months and go, I'll go for free and get my boss
and even more. Yeah. So I tell you what, I don't expect a number 9 in this window. I'm not sure I see Lacazette going.
No, I'd be very surprised if we could find, if we somehow managed to sell Lacazette and Willian, I would hand out some gold stars to Edu and Richard Garlick, I have to say, because those situations are difficult. Whether you say or how you want to frame them in terms of it being our own fault. I mean, Lacazette's a different one because you bought a 26-year-old striker on big money. He's coming to the end of his contract. That's a reality that many clubs have to deal with. The Willian one, of course, a bed entirely of our own making. So that's where we are with them. But it doesn't mean, I don't mean to say that makes it any less difficult to sell them. They're really difficult deals to do to convince, a player to leave who might not want to leave. Like, I don't get the sense that Lacazette is actively pushing to go anywhere else.
No.
In
fairness, he's looks sharp, fairly sharp in pre-season thus far.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like a guy who doesn't want to be there. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think the lack of movement on that one is what will nip Arsenal's Abraham ambitions in the bud. But they definitely do like him, and I think if Lacazette did move, I think that's one they would go for sure.
Let me see. I've got one.
If
go on, yeah. Go on.
What Calv, who's at CalvTom0, says, what do you think of us trying to snap up young English players? Do you think there are going to be changes to the homegrown quota? And then he adds, Ramsdale looks like he may be the guy as well. Are you happy about that? But what do you think about the English thing? I mean, it's interesting. Ben White, Abraham mentioned, obviously Ramsdale too. Do you think there is anything deliberate to that pattern?
It feels a bit like it, doesn't it? It does feel a bit like it.
It does feel that way, yeah. Especially with foregrounding Smith Rowe in the way they have. And
yeah. I wonder, is it a case of they're looking at players who, even if things don't necessarily work out quite as well, will retain a certain value because of A, their age, and B, their homegrown status.
And C, the kind of clubs they want to go to. Like, if you've got Lucas Torreira and he decides, I want to go and play in Uruguay or wherever it might be, or even Spain or Italy, you're probably limited in terms of what you can expect in terms of a fee.
Yeah.
But if you've got, I don't know, Ben White and it doesn't work out and he wants to go to Everton or Aston Villa, you can probably extract more from them than you could from a top European club.
Yeah. I think that's part of it. I do wonder as well if part of it is just sort of, you know, it's an interesting aspect of it because we've got a Spanish manager, a Brazilian technical director, a German head of the academy. You know, it's a multicultural organization at executive level, American owners, you know, but there is maybe some nod to the fact that Arsenal is an English club. And I think fans like to see homegrown players to an extent. But, you know, with Wenger, you know, he came in and brought in a whole load of French players. Mikel Arteta hasn't brought in a load of Spaniards or Spanish players, which is quite interesting because I think there is a kind of natural, you tend to think well of your fellow countrymen to an extent, you know, just because.
Yeah, but maybe it would be fair to say that a lot of Mikel Arteta and to an extent Edu's kind of football formative grounding experiences came in English football with surrounded by British players. I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, setting aside the quota, which obviously does matter. Does it matter to have English players? You know,
I think it matters to have good players first, and that was something that Wenger always said, wasn't it? You look at the passport second, you look at the quality of the player first.
I agree with you, but then I do think back to sort of quotes from Thierry Henry about how important he felt it was that he had, you know, people like Ray Parlour, maybe it's just sort of experience of the league rather than nationality that mattered.
Yeah.
But I do get the sense from Arsenal this summer that this is deliberate. I do get that impression. I just feel like there seems to be an emphasis on, let's have a kind of young, homegrown, and maybe it's about stability as well. Maybe it's about the fact that they settle. I don't know.
I think you're right. I think that's part of it. I mean, someone like Torreira, we keep going back to him, you know, came from South America, settled in Italy, didn't really settle in England. Like, I don't think it was a huge problem for him, but never felt fully at home. You know what I mean? I don't think there are any of those issues of adaptation for English players. So,
whereas you look at Kieran Tierney, for example, who will be, all right, he comes down from Scotland, but a seamless adaptation, really, to England and London and Arsenal. And, I mean, touch wood, it doesn't feel like he's going anywhere anytime soon. You know, he seems very comfortable with the idea that this is where he is now.
Did he get a contract extension?
He did as well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, on the contract extension front, we are extending some really interesting younger players. But I think, he got a 5-year deal, didn't he? Just before the Euros, maybe. But what was I going to say? Yeah, it does feel deliberate. And maybe that, again, that is part of it. If they're thinking in terms of 3, 4, 5 years, they want people who are going to be settled, stick around. It does feel like a cultural choice. I know that some people will scoff at it, I'm sure, because it's quite old-fashioned in a funny sort of way. Yeah,
I've seen some questions like, why are we going for... Like, I mean, do you think that's playing a part in the interest and the bids for Aaron Ramsdale? When you could make the argument, and I think it's a decent argument, that you could find at least as good a goalkeeper somewhere in Europe for far less. I mean,
yeah, I think that's true. I think that's definitely true. I thought your chat with the Sheffield United fan was quite interesting. If people hadn't heard it on the Arsecast the other day, I imagined the reactions of Arsenal fans when he said, and he seemed like a sane, sensible chap. But he said, if Sheffield United win the Premier League, I wouldn't expect them to sell Ramsdale for anything less than £50 million, which I imagined Arsenal fans' heads kind of exploding at that idea.
Yeah,
I think It definitely is part of it. And I do wonder as well if, especially given that he probably wouldn't start as number one immediately, him being someone who is going to be sort of comfortable in England. Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, the homegrown quota, I think, is part of it too. They will go back for Ramsdale. I don't think it's a question of they want Ramsdale at any price. I think, what Sheffield United are asking is steep. And the way I understand Arsenal's interest in Ramsdale is that they want to structure a kind of deal where they would pay an initial fee around 20 million, something like that, make sure Sheffield United get their money back, and that the rest of the fee would be constructed out of add-ons, which would only really be payable if he goes on to become the number one.
Right. Achievement bonuses like X amount of appearances, England appearances, if those things happen.
So X appearances in the first 5 years, England appearances, and also things that relate to the achievement of the team, like Champions League qualification.
Sure. Like when you used to buy someone on Football Manager, and I'll bid 500,000, but I'll pay you 20 million billion if he makes 3,000 appearances.
Yeah, and I don't think it's quite as unrealistic as that, but I think the perspective is, if this guy goes on to become Arsenal's number one, then maybe he is worth 30 million. But we don't want to pay that, and in case that's not what happens, if you see what I mean. Which is actually, I think, makes the deal slightly more understandable. But yeah, they will go back for him. I don't know if it will get done though, because I think it's quite urgent for Arsenal. I think they actually need someone in that position.
Yeah.
And I think if they don't get Ramsdale, who is the clear number one target, I wonder if they'll do a Matt Ryan-esque quick fix, kick it down the road thing. But they did that last summer. They wanted David Raya. They pursued him as closely as they pursued Ramsdale this summer. It didn't happen. They got Runarsson, didn't work. They got Matt Ryan. They clearly decided we want to put this to bed and get a guy for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
But if they can't do a deal, I think this is another one that might get kicked down the road, and they might, have to make a short-term acquisition.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've got to do something before the start of the season, because that's
the issue for them. Yeah.
If something happens to Leno, if he gets sent off in the first game, something like that, you've then got that huge gap between your first goalkeeper and your third goalkeeper in terms of experience, in terms of quality, in terms of readiness, etc., etc. So, yeah, it is definitely something they're going to have to address. Here's a question from, where is it? We'll do a couple of quick ones. Peter Hust on the Discord says, what's your take on the partnership with Socios and the fan tokens?
Oh, man. I really don't know what I think about that. I mean, that's on brand for me. Arsenal's, I mean, token is maybe the correct word. Arsenal's kind of concessions to kind of fan involvement in the club feel quite tokenistic, especially even compared with some of the other Premier League clubs. In a way, I kind of respect Arsenal's clarity and realism about the fact that they're not claiming they're going to let fans get involved with the running of the club. Like, I think the way like Spurs and Chelsea presented the kind of fan involvement at board level probably made it out to be more influential than it is. And Arsenal were at least like, no, we're going to have this separate committee and it won't really govern sort of football matters in any way. So, yeah, in a way, I'm like, well, at least it's up front and at least it's honest. The Socios thing just feels like a way of kind of monetizing that desire for fan involvement.
I mean, you could just have fan involvement without fans having to pay for it. You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
Because none of the shit that's going to go down on this Socios thing is going to be...
of any great consequence.
No, not really. Maybe there might be one or two sort of polls that take place that might impact the match day experience to a very minor level, but you could just do those things anyway. You could drive fan engagement without having to get fans to put their hands in their pocket to buy some fucking bullshit cryptocurrency that's basically worthless, apart from allowing you to vote on the fucking direction of flags or whatever it might be, you know? So from that sense, I think it's a bit grotty, to be honest. I don't like it. I understand why they're doing it because, you know, it's something that they're getting paid to do, I imagine. A few million into the bank account at this point is probably welcome, you know?
It's definitely about money,
yeah,
for sure.
It is. But, you know, there are things that I think if you were to say, how should we do this? It shouldn't be by making people buy things they don't need to buy or spend money on this thing. I mean, look, at the end of the day, nobody has to spend any money on it if they don't want to. If you think it's an absolute grift and it's a load of old bullshit, you don't have to spend any money on it. But at the same time, people like to be involved with their club and, I don't know.
I think actually, in terms of sort of fan involvement, I was much more encouraged by, I don't know if you read the interim findings from Tracy Crouch's review into football governance that she was doing for, and you can find that, I think the AST retweeted it. It's quite long, but it is worth reading, and it does provide some encouragement in terms of what she has found and what she is recommending. I think she recommended an independent regulator, a golden share on key heritage issues. That is the one thing that makes me think, we might get somewhere with this. Everything else is just kind of noise and PR at this point.
Okay, final one.
Go on.
From D. Smith on the Discord. He says, given the state of Rob Holding's hairline, which of the following should he elect? A, full cue ball shave. B, woolly bald horseshoe. C, Bobby Charlton style comb over. D, Rooney AstroTurf patch.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, Rob Holding, because I think the assumption has been, he's just shaved it all off. But he may be going again. You know, we don't know what interventions may have taken place regarding Rob Holding.
What if one day during the holidays, Rob Holding sat down? I see he's got a new dog, by the way, on his Instagram. Right. It's very cute. Rob Holding's new dog. He's got a little retriever puppy.
Cute.
Yeah. So, but what if one day he was sitting down with an afternoon spare to himself and he thought, you know what, I'll watch a movie. What movie will I watch? I'll just flick around Netflix or whatever and see what pops up. What pops up, James? Baby Driver. What's in Baby Driver? John Hamm. John Hamm's amazing Baby Driver hair. What if Rob Holding has decided, hey, I've got the means, I've got the resources, I could do with a little touch up there. Why not go all in and get John Hamm's hair from Baby Driver? He's gone into whatever the hair replacement guy is.
With a picture of John Hamm.
Picture of John Hamm in Baby Driver. Give me that. Give me one of those. Make it happen. Here's the cash. He's going to be the most debonair defender in the Premier League next season.
Exactly. I think we've got to let this one play out, really, before we can pass any judgment. But look, I mean, you know, I don't think he looks awful with the shaved head. I think he looks all right.
Yeah, look, who are we to pass judgment?
Certainly, we're not in best position.
No, absolutely not. But if
we just wish we could afford John Hamm's hair.
Exactly. I mean, if I was Rob Holding, that's what I would do. So that's my recommendation for Rob Holding. We'll see what happens. Maybe he'll have a big surprise for us. Maybe they'll do an unveiling.
It's still pre-season in hair terms, guys.
Do you know what? This is something that they're going to monetize through the fucking crypto thing. Buy crypto tokens to decide what happens with Rob Holding's hair. That's the kind of shit they get up to.
Exactly. It's one to watch, definitely. You know, this is a developing team, a developing squad. The same has to be said for Rob Holding's hairline. We don't know what direction it's going to take.
All right, we will leave it there. As ever, thank you very much indeed for being here, for listening, for downloading, for supporting. You can sign up to Patreon if you like, patreon.com/Arseblog. Things will start ticking along there now as we start to make more signings and get closer to the season preview podcast and all the rest. For now, though, we'll leave it there and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.